Ladies and gentlemen, we may be witnessing the it's happening moment of the 2020 presidential election. Many people are wondering how Donald Trump could actually win. I mean, Joe Biden is projected to get 306 electoral votes. The states have all basically, they're starting to certify. Donald Trump is at 232. It must surely be over. Well, Trump, of course, is suing. But maybe those lawsuits weren't the real it's happening, if you know what I mean. And I mean like the event that changes things, if you're not familiar with the meme. A couple nights ago, or just the other night, in Wayne County, Michigan, where Detroit is, 2 Republicans refused to certify the results of the election because there were very serious discrepancies that were not being explained to them. These Republicans didn't understand why there were unbalanced ballot books or voter books. Basically, there were a different amount of signatures having entered in than there were votes, and that's kind of strange. They weren't given an explanation, so they said, we're not going to sign off on this. Well, the left then began doxing them, harassing them. One guy even said, your kids go to this school. And then all of a sudden, they decided to certify the vote. Gee, I wonder what that was all about. Now, the it's happening moment. See, when that happened, I was like, whoa. If they refuse to certify Detroit and Michigan certifies without Detroit, Trump wins Michigan. More importantly, if they can't decide by a certain deadline, then the Michigan electors might just vote however they want, or the Republicans could appoint their electors, and then Trump gets the electoral votes. Or maybe they just freeze the state and say, we're not going to send any electors. Joe Biden then drops down. And if this happens a couple more times, then there's no 270 winner. It goes to a House delegation vote. Trump wins. There are more Republican House delegations than Democrat. That would require a couple more states to have some kind of massive discrepancy, irregularity, or to suspend the results of their elections. And it might be coming. Now, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I've said for some time that I feel like, Joe Biden is going to win this one. But this is where it gets crazy. 2 Wayne County Board of Canvassers trying to rescind vote certification. Republican members signed affidavits in effort to rescind yes votes, with one of the board members saying their family was threatened. Oh, well, then you have duress. Certainly, this vote can't be certified. But the left is countering back saying, no, they're just changing their mind. They certified. Well, both of these canvassers are saying they agreed to certify because they wanted an independent audit. And then as soon as they did, basically one of the state officials went, we're not giving you anything. No audit for you. You signed off. We win. And that's all that you need to know. If they're not going to do an independent audit, they're acting in bad faith. Sorry. If these Republicans see massive discrepancies that you can't account for or explain, and then you agree, we'll do an audit, and you say, okay. That's the Republicans acting in good faith. Fine, we'll certify. The Democrats in this instance, very clearly in the wrong. That's it. Listen, you've got all these people on social media saying these Republicans are just terrified of Trump. No, they're not. They're terrified of the Antifa leftists and BLM people who have been burning buildings down and are now threatening their families. They're not worried about Trump. They're worried about the threats, and they're being tricked. If this was a good faith certification, they would have given the audit, but now they're saying no. Well, now you know who's really trying to just shovel through, just ram through these results. This could be the beginning. Right now, many leftists, and I'll read through this, are saying you can't take your vote back. Too late. We've already passed a motion. No revisiting the issue. Sorry, but I don't think it actually works that way. People got to understand that legal issues are actually a bit more fluid. They could go to court now. This is all Trump needs. As soon as these affidavits came out, you're done. Because what's going to happen now is, or potentially, they might say we're moving to certify Michigan for Biden. And these Republicans and Trump could both file lawsuits saying, no way. They threatened them. They threatened them with physical violence in their families to force this through. We want an injunction on certification until we can investigate exactly what happened. Then they won't meet the deadline. There's no re-election, no votes for Joe Biden. That might be the actual path to victory. It could also just be that many Republicans had already discussed with Donald Trump if he loses, they're going to certify him anyway. They're going to send the electors for Trump. Apparently, in Pennsylvania, some Republicans had already talked to Trump about this. Now they're denying it. But maybe that was the plan all along. Let me tell you. They say, I love the Q meme, trust the plan. Sorry, I don't. I don't know what they're doing. Just because they have a plan doesn't mean the plan is good or it's going to work. So sorry. We're also hearing now, release the Kraken. When you release the Kraken and I see it, I'll report on it. But, until then. But I got to thinking when I saw this, why is Trump filing these lawsuits? Why is Trump calling for a recount? Okay, maybe, the recount makes sense, I guess. In Georgia, 3 counties now found ballots that were just not counted for some reason, giving Trump a historical gain in a recount. Something like 1,400 plus votes. That's huge. And that shaved off more than 10% of Joe Biden's lead. And that was just 3 counties. Perhaps there's more widespread error. They just keep saying human error, human error. I don't know how they've concluded it's human error because they can't give us an explanation. And if they just say we think it's human error, then we think it could be anything, right? Well, now we're seeing Donald Trump take this action. We're taking the recounts and the lawsuits. And I started to wonder. This is what I said before. So hear me out, and then we'll read the story. I got a bunch more I got to go through. I got the affidavits. It's crazy. If Donald Trump said on Saturday, when they called it for Biden, I refuse to concede, and then did nothing and just said, I'm not going to sue. I'm just not going to concede. And then Republicans started calling it for Trump. People would be like, what? Trump knew this was going to happen. Now Trump is buying time with lawsuits. The left is saying the lawsuits are frivolous. They're so dumb. Maybe Trump is just like, we're going to keep going through the process. We're going to challenge this until we can get to certification. Or, to be honest, it might just be Trump is fighting tooth and nail. There's no grand plan. Nobody was prepared for this. But as they dig in more and more into accusations of fraud and impropriety, and they get more evidence, it results in Republicans being like, dude, I can't certify this. 71% of the books were like unbalanced. That's insane. And I love the excuse from the left is, this happens all the time. Oh, does it? Wow, that is nightmarishly bad. Happens all the time. Reminds me of that Family Guy joke where the bar burns down and then they ask the insurance guy, they're like, isn't it strange to you that the guy bought insurance for fire and then it burned down the next day? And he goes, no, actually it happens all the time. Yes, it's because it's fraud. Anyway, here's the story. 2 Wayne County Board of Canvassers trying to rescind their vote certification. Republican members signed affidavits in effort to rescind yes votes. According to the New York Times, Monica Palmer and William Hartman signed affidavits in an effort to rescind their yes votes Wednesday evening. In affidavits obtained by the Washington Post, Palmer said, quote, the Wayne County election had serious process flaws which deserve investigation. I continue to ask for information to assure Wayne County voters that these elections were conducted fairly and accurately. Hartman said in an affidavit, late in the evening, I was enticed to agree to certify based on the promise that a full and independent audit would take place. I would not have agreed to the certification but for the promise of an audit. The board vice chairman, Jonathan Kinlock, told the New York Times that vote was final. That vote was binding. You can't leave and then decide after a meeting adjourned that you want to decide from your living room that you don't like the vote and sign something that says you're under duress. We're always under attack. Whoa, buddy. Dude says he was under duress. Okay. These Democrats are not acting in good faith at all. This is crazy. Don't you want to make sure that the people who voted in Detroit have a vote? This is the game they play. The Democrats are calling the Republicans racists. And apparently it worked at first. Let me tell you the truth. You know the real racists are? Democrats. You know why? There are hundreds of thousands of minority voters in Detroit. And if there is evidence of something wrong and you refuse to investigate it, you are basically saying to these people that their vote matters less to you than the white neighborhoods. The Democrats have evidence of impropriety and are refusing to investigate it because they don't care about the minority communities. If there is an area that is predominantly black and there is serious evidence and there's evidence of a serious error, then it may be that their votes are being diluted or stolen, and we should give them a full investigation as they so deserve. But the Democrats are saying the Republicans are racist for calling to verify the votes. Why? That would only empower and strengthen these minority communities. The Democrats are acting in bad faith, and I can only assume then it's because they're not being honest. Hartman and Palmer voted not to certify the election results earlier this week before reversing course after certifying the results during a heated meeting. Hartman, 62, is a Wyandotte businessman who has been on the board since 2015. When asked why he changed his vote, he said it was because of the inclusion of an independent audit. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said she doesn't believe a request for audit is binding. She said, essentially, you saw two individuals on the Wayne County Board of Canvassers who have a ministerial responsibility to certify the county canvass of election results, refusing to do so on baseless claims. And that were ultimately clerical errors that occurred in nearly every election in nearly every jurisdiction. So you mean to tell me that there are serious errors in every jurisdiction of your state? Thank you for the evidence. Please, can someone now file a suit and say they've admitted there are clerical errors in every election? If there is a clerical error in every jurisdiction, nearly every jurisdiction, sounds like your election process is broken, and we should not be using that, because I will not have you and your broken election system decide who my president is supposed to be. If you are irresponsible and you refuse to go through your own elections to make sure you correct these errors, I don't trust you, and I don't want you lying to gain power. That is insane. Before the vote, Palmer said she would certify every community in Wayne County except Detroit. She did not speak to reporters following the meeting. Palmer plans to hold a news conference in the near future. The Michigan Board of State Canvassers has until November 23rd to certify the election. If they don't, it will go to court. 4 days. December 8th is considered the safe harbor deadline for certification. That's at the federal level. Palmer, 40, is the Board of Canvassers chairperson. She's also a Grosse Pointe Woods political activist. An ethics complaint has been filed against her for alleged conflict of interest due to that work. The Wayne County Ethics Board is looking into that complaint. When Local 4 went to her home to ask about the vote change, no one answered the door. So I'll tell you right now, maybe they can't change their vote. But this does, I believe, give a legitimate grounds for some kind of court action. They might so I'll put it this way. The board might say it's certified, F off. They go to court and they say, we want an injunction because we were being threatened. My family was being threatened. And I think a reasonable judge might be like, show me evidence that you were getting threats. And they'll be like, here you go. And they'll say, all right, we got a problem here. We cannot function as a democracy, as the left likes to say. We're not, but, as they say, if people are being threatened into certifying votes. Can you believe? I got to stress this point, that they straight up admitted there were clerical errors, serious ones, in nearly every jurisdiction? Wow. I believe that calls into question nearly the entire state of Michigan. How can we certify that at the federal level if they're coming out and just saying it? We're talking about unbalanced books. That means there's a different number of people who signed in versus who voted. Something doesn't add up. Now, there is a simple solution that they offer up. They say it's because sometimes people go in, they sign the book, they want to vote, then they get bored and they leave. I'm not entirely convinced you can just walk away from that, however. Giving me a simple solution is not giving me definitive evidence explaining why it's happening all over the place. Do you have cameras at these places? Can you show us and do a hard count? If not, your election system is broken, and we shouldn't just sit back and be like, oh yeah, we have weird discrepancies across the board in the entire state, but who cares? This is your fault for not being prepared. The other issue is, I don't even know if the issue is that there are more signatures than votes. Because if there are more votes than signatures, now you got a real problem, right? Because that doesn't seem to make sense. Explain that one. But they haven't actually, gone through this. So check this out. Jack Posobiec, he tweeted this and he says, affidavit of Chairperson Monica Palmer. She says in this area that Jack has circled or put a box around, after the vote, Democrat colleagues chided me and Mr. Hartman for voting to not certify. After the vote, public comment period began, and dozens of people made personal remarks against me and Mr. Hartman. The comments made accusations of racism and threatened me and members of my family. The public comment continued for over 2 hours, and I felt pressured to continue the meeting without a break. After several hours of harsh comments, Vice Chair Kinlock suggested a potential resolution. Wayne County Corporate Counsel Janet Anderson Davis told me that I had to certify the vote that night. She told the members their role was ministerial and they could not use their discretion on matters like the record being incomplete. We were told that discretion was outside the board's authority. So they were lied to, threatened, and harassed into agreeing to this. That, my friends, is not how our system is supposed to work. But let me show you where we end up. Check this out. Ivan Penchikov, I believe of Epic Times, says, Georgia recount worker with 20 years of experience handling ballots, described an odd batch that stood out. pristine sheets with no markings, and 98% for Biden. Check this out. He says, in my 20 years of experience of handling ballots, I observed the markings for the candidates on these ballots were unusually uniform, perhaps even with a ballot marking device. By my estimate in observing these ballots, approximately 98% constituted votes for Joe Biden. I only observed 2 of these ballots for Donald Trump. Twitter removed his second tweet. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Third monitor, a Democrat. Hundreds of these ballots seemed impeccable with no folds or creases. The bubble sections were all perfectly made, only observed sections in black ink, and all happened to be selections for Biden. A Democrat said this. Based on my observations, I believe there was fraud committed in the presidential election and questioned the validity of the Georgia recount process. Fourth witness, also a Democrat, saw perfect black marks on a stack of ballots, 500 in a row for Biden. I watched them pull out a pile of what I observed to be absentee ballots and noticed 2 very distinct characteristics that these ballots had. One, I noticed that they all had a perfect black bubble and were all Biden select. I was able to observe the perfect bubble for a few minutes before they made me move away from the table. At no time did I speak to poll workers or obstruct them in any way. I heard them go through the stack and call out Biden's name over 500 times in a row. Georgia. So what do we do? Do we ignore it? Same witness went to a different Georgia county the next day and observed the same anomaly during the recount. All of these ballots had the same 2 characteristics. They were all for Biden and had the same perfect black bubble. Fifth witness, Kay Fisher, saw very clean military and overseas ballots with no bubbles colored outside the line. Almost all for Biden, including batches that were 100% for Biden. At what point does 5 or 6 sworn statements constitute widespread irregularity? Yes, sure. I won't say fraud because I don't know what these are or where they came from. And all we know is that these people are saying, what is going on? At a certain point, we have to say, okay, we have evidence of widespread something. They don't want to say fraud. You can't say fraud. You can't say fraud. I think, to be fair, and I'm trying to take this, be very, very careful with this one. I don't think we should be saying fraud because that implies intent and it implies someone did something. Like there's a person who planned on doing this. We don't have any of the evidence. We don't know exactly what happened, and it's likely. So we can say this is evidence, a sign or indication that fraud occurred, but it is proof of impropriety. If we have, well, I should say it's more, I should be very careful. I'll be very careful because I want this to go through the proper channels and get sorted out properly. And that means we have multiple witnesses saying the same thing, corroborating each other's story. In my opinion, that is as close as proof as you can probably get until we pull up these ballots. So pull them up, investigate. I want to see these ballots. Where are they at? And you know what? If they do a hand recount and they notice these same things, because that's what the people are saying right now in the hand recount, these weird bubbles. It's like perfect printer ink or whatever. Well, people noticed. Maybe that's why they didn't want the full audit and the full recount. Maybe that's why the Democrats are saying no to the recount, no to the lawsuits. Just shut up, submit, just give in. Maybe it's because now that people are actually looking at the ballots, they're going, whoa, what is this? Because normally they just put them in the machine, right? And the machine says for Biden. And they go, okay. In 3 counties, they found historical margins for Trump. 3 counties. Well, it's not just, there's a lot more coming. We have this video. Dan Scavino posted it. And Code Monkey Z, who's getting a lot of attention, says Dominion tech guys might be deleting evidence. I don't know about all that. Sure, maybe. It's going around. It's got 14,000 retweets. I thought it'd be important to share. But I can tell you in this video, I don't know who these guys are, but they're saying that voting machine workers are doing something to the machines right now. We are in the middle of an election. We have not completed the constitutional process, and they're fiddling with the machines. I think if we get a proper judge or the Supreme Court, they got to shut this down. And I know what that means. It means Donald Trump wins because the House delegation will vote for him. But if we're in the middle of a recount, if we're in the and the machine workers are coming out, we're going to go to this machine real quick. Are you insane? Lock those machines up. Nope. Come on in, boys. Do whatever you want to our voting integrity. That to me, just absolutely nuts. In this tweet, Jimmy Rutenberg says, he points out the Democrats say in reference to Michigan, they don't have the legal ability to rescind their claims. So I highlight this I want to make sure I'm pointing out that there are people who challenge this, and it may not result in an actual blocking of the certification. But as I stated, it may just come down to the fact there's a legal challenge, and that's all they need. The next big story, after bitter meeting, Wisconsin panel to order recount Trump wants in 2 largely Democratic counties. Here's what's crazy. So Trump is putting up $3 million for recounts in 2 counties. And the Democrats apparently tried changing the rules, but got deadlocked 3-3. And then ultimately, no rules were changed. This is the Trump supporters are celebrating, saying they were going to try and change the rules to try and block Trump. I don't know what we can expect, but let me just say, this may be the beginning of it's happening. This could be the period at which Trump starts to turn things around. You've got all these people dancing in the streets, stomping on Cheetos bags in New York and drinking champagne. What are they going to do when, let me put it this way. Twitter keeps putting those tags on tweets, right? Saying official sources said this and multiple sources said that. Trump says, I won. And they say official sources called the race for Joe Biden or whatever, or they put the statement on there. What happens if official sources call it for Trump and then all of a sudden all those tags on Twitter invert? What do you think these people are going to do? It'll be like that scene from Indiana Jones where the guy's like, Kalima, and he rips their heart out. That's what they're going to feel. They're going to be like, oh, their brains are going to explode. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm not saying I think it will happen. I have no idea what's going to happen, but let me just end with this. Donald Trump says, important news conference today by lawyers on a very clear and viable path to victory. Pieces are very nicely falling into place. RNC, 12 p.m. Okay. And in response, Jake Tapper said, the president and the RNC have been clear that they're trying to concoct ways to overturn the results of a free and fair democratic election. And if you're a GOP official affirming the integrity of the election, like Krebs, GS Secretary of State, Commissioner Schmidt, they will attack you. My response to this, Jake Tapper, this is one of the most irresponsible and dangerous things you can be tweeting right now. Donald Trump has a constitutional right to challenge these states and the votes. These are called safeguards to prevent impropriety and fraud and failure to make sure that our elections are free and fair. Could you imagine if the Constitution said the election shall be held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday and the winner will be decided by media companies? That would be insane. Jake Tapper is blaming Trump and everyone else. What he's really doing is Jake Tapper is undermining the Constitution. The results have not been federally certified. Many of the states are moving to certification now. Trump is well within the period to file legal challenges. These exist to make sure our country doesn't fall to a despotic, fascistic manipulation. And it also means that Trump has the right to do so, even if you don't like the guy. And maybe Trump is the one trying to do whatever. It doesn't matter. The safeguards exist for a reason. End of story. We have contingencies for this, and it's in there to make sure the bad guys don't just walk in and take over. Jake Tapper is trying to undermine that constitutional process. And in my opinion, that is horrifyingly dangerous. He's mad, in my opinion, that the media doesn't dictate reality anymore. Sorry, that's not the way things work. The way things work is that we have a process. The electors vote for the president. Trump has a right to dispute what is now multiple sworn affidavits. What are we at, like a dozen plus of irregularities, threats to certification boards? The irregularities are stacking up and it's staggering. And you're like, Trump, submit or else. Sorry, we don't bow to CNN. We have a constitutional process. In Michigan, let me just end by saying this. They admitted, they straight up said, let me pull this up just to make sure you take this one home. I want you to take this one home. They say, baseless claims. Essentially, you saw 2 individuals on the Wayne County Board of Canvassers who have ministerial responsibility to certify the county canvass election results, refusing to do so on baseless claims, and that were ultimately clerical errors that occurred in nearly every election in nearly every jurisdiction. They think they're telling me it's normal. Ignore this. What they're really saying to you and me is the problems affected the entire state. So I hope whatever legal challenge comes up, they take that quote and they say, Your Honor, they straight out said these errors we're seeing, we can't verify the numbers, happened everywhere. Then why did they certify? Why are we allowing this? And you might find a federal judge going, that's a really good point. Your elections are broken. And it is not the fault of people in other states that happened. And it is not fair that your broken system can dictate the president of the United States. Sorry, we have a constitution. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Stick around. We got news coming. Trump's press conference. We'll see what happens. I might have to do the one at 4 because of my recording schedule, but I will see you all in the next segment at 1 p.m. Thanks for hanging out.